My message is, what if we just didn't go in and create stuff for him to fix?
The Almighty steps into the scene and intervenes and says, I'll tell you what to do.
In the courts of the Lord.
They shall still bring forth fruit in their old age.
You get caught up in all of those things. But if you don't know what you have to do, you're not even going to be there.
Roche, Jamie Down.
Shabbat shalom, everyone. As Roche Scott said, this week is a double portion. And normally when it's a double portion, you will come from the latter portion out of the double portion, which is Metzorah. I'm going to, however, go into some of Tesarai, or Tesaria, because they really go together. And in order for you to understand Metzorah, and even the Haftorah for Metzorah, you have to understand the illness that is in the first portion, and the illness is called Tesara'at, which has been erroneously translated as leprosy. Being as though I'm going to go into the Haftorah, because this cycle we're speaking from the Haftorah, but I'm dealing a lot with the Torah, so I'm going to do the blessing for the Torah. So can everyone please stand with me? Baruch as Yahweh Hambarak, Baruch Yahweh Hambarak le'olam ha'ed, Baruch Yahweh Hambarak le'olam ha'ed, Baruch atah Yahweh Eloheinu melech ha'olam, Asher bakar banu mikol ha'amin, V'aseh lanu et Torato, Baruch atah Yahweh noten ha'torah. Amen. Bless Yahweh the Blessed One. Blesses Yahweh the Blessed One for all eternity. Blessed are you, O Yahweh Elohim, King of the universe, who selected us from all people and gave us his Torah. Blessed are you, O Yahweh, giver of the Torah. All right, you can be seated. As I said, we're going to deal with the Haftorah portion. So can you please turn with me to 2 Kings. The 7th chapter. And normally they will read from the 3rd verse. We'll start the reading from the 3rd verse, but I want to start it from the 1st verse to put emphasis on the last verse, and you'll see why. So even though normally we'll start with the 3rd verse, I'm going to start with the 1st verse to put emphasis on the last verse. And the title I have for this message is 4 Lepers and Some Barley. 4 lepers and some barley. So then Elisha said, Hear ye the word of Yahweh. Thus says Yahweh, tomorrow about this time shall a measure of fine flour be sold for a shekel, and 2 measures of barley for a shekel in the gate of Samaria. Then a Lord on whose hand the king leaned answered the man of Elohim and said, Behold, if Yahweh will make the windows in heaven, might this thing be? And he said, Behold, you shall see it with your eyes. Talking about, this is Elisha talking. He said, behold, you shall see it with your eyes, but you shall not eat thereof. And there were 4 leprous men at the evening of the gate. And he said one to another, why sit we here until we die? If we say we will enter into the city, then a famine is in the city, and we shall die there. And if we sit here, we shall die also. Now therefore come and let us fall unto the host of the Syrians. If they save us alive, we shall live. And if they kill us, we shall but die. And they rose in the twilight to go into the camp of the Syrians. And when they were come to the uttermost parts of the camp of Syria, behold, there was no man there. For Yahweh had made the host of the Syrians to hear the noise of chariots and the noise of horses, even the noise of a great host. And they said to one another, behold, the king of Israel has hired against us the kings of the Hittites and the kings of the Egyptians to come upon us. Wherefore they arose and fled in the twilight and left their tents and their horses and their donkeys, even the camp as it was, and fled for their life. And when these lepers came to the uttermost part of the camp, they went into one tent and did eat and drink, and carried from thence silver and gold and raiment, and went and hid it, and came into another tent, and carried from thence also, and went and hid that. Then they said to one another, we are not doing the right thing. This day is a day of good tidings, and we hold our peace. If we continue until the morning light, some mischief or bad thing will come upon us. Now therefore come, that we may go and tell the king's household. So they came and called unto the porter or the gatekeeper of the city, and they told them, saying, we came to the camp of the Syrians, behold, there was no man there, neither voice of man, but horses tied and donkeys tied, and their tents as they were. And he called the porters, and they told it to the king's house within. And the king arose in the night and said unto his servants, I will now show you or explain to you what the Syrians are doing or have done to us. They know that we are hungry. Therefore they are gone out of the camp and hid themselves in the field, saying, when they come out of the city, we will catch them alive and get into the city. And one of his servants answered and said, let some take, I pray thee, 5 of the horses that remain, which are left in the city. Behold, they are as all the multitude of Israel that are left in it. Behold, I say, they are even as the multitude of the Israelites that are consumed. And let us send and see. They took therefore 2 chariots of horses, and the king sent after the host of Syrians, saying, go and see. And they came after them unto the Jordan, and lo, all the way was full of garments and vessels, which the Syrians had cast away in their haste. And the messengers returned and told the king. And the people went out and spoiled the tents of the Syrians. So a measure of fine flour was sold for a shekel, and 2 measures of barley for a shekel, according to the word of Yahweh. And the king appointed that Lord whose hand he leaned on to have charge over the gate. And the people trode upon him, that man, in the gate, and he died. As the man of Elohim has said, who spoke to the king when the king came down to him, and it shall come to pass, and it came to pass as the man of Elohim had spoken to the king, saying, 2 measures of barley for a shekel, and of fine flour for a shekel, shall be tomorrow about this time at the gate of Samaria. And that Lord or master answered the man of Elohim and said, now behold, if Elohim should make the windows in heaven, might such a thing be? And he said, behold, thy eyes shall see it, but you shall not eat thereof. And so it fell out unto him, for the people trode upon him in the gate, and he died. Now, before I get into the moral of the story, the first thing we need to understand is what is a metzorah or a leper. A metzorah or a leper is not what the dictionary explains to us about leprosy, where you talk about your limbs getting deformed and falling off and so forth and so on. That is not what the Bible term Tsarat is speaking of. That's what leprosy means, but they erroneously translated Tsarat as leprosy, where it's not leprosy. Tsarat is a plague in your skin, and it does cause rawness, but it has certain symptoms that I want to go over. So can you please turn with me to Vayikra or Leviticus, the 13th chapter. And I'm going to start at verse 1. And it reads, Yahweh spoke to Moshe and Aharon, saying, if a person will have on the skin of his flesh seest, or let me go to the English version, we're using different words. I want y'all to see it from your translation. When a man will have in the skin of his flesh a rising, a scab, or bright spot, and it be in the skin of his flesh, like the plague of Tsarat, then he shall be brought unto Aharon the Kohen, or to one of his sons, the Kohanim. And the Kohen shall look on the plague in the skin of the flesh. Now, the priests during this time period were sort of like the doctors. They knew when they had to quarantine someone to make sure something didn't have any kind of outbreak. So Yahweh set it up where he explained to them, or Moshe was explaining, what they will look at to see if someone had this plague of Tsarat. So the first thing that you had to do, it says, and the priest shall look on the plague in the skin of the flesh, and when the hair in the plague is turned white. So he looked to see if the hair in the plagued area is white. So that's one thing they're looking for. Then they look, and it says, and the plague in the sight is deeper than the skin of his flesh. In other words, if it looked like it's deeper than just being on the top layer of his skin, as if it's within the whole area or underneath the skin. and the hair thereof be not turned. Oh, I skipped something. Okay. Let me go back. And the priest shall look on the plague in the skin of the flesh, and when the hair in the plague is turned white, and the plague in the sight be deeper than the skin of his flesh, it is the plague of Tasara'at. And the priest shall look on him and pronounce him unclean. If the bright spot be white in the skin of his flesh, and in the sight be not deeper than the skin, and the hair thereof be not turned white, then the priest shall shut him up that has a plague for 7 days. Now, one of the things that they looked for with this plague was the discoloration of your skin and the hair within that area. Now, eventually, this plague could consume your whole body. Now, we know the story when Moshe was out and he asked the Almighty to, what would he do, for signs to explain to the people who they are and how would they believe him. And he told him, stick your hand in your bosom. And he stuck his hand in and he told him, take it out. And he said his hand was leprous, white as snow. So the idea behind it was looking for whiteness in the skin. Now I'm going to get a little technical, so I'm trying to take my time with it, because I don't want to seem as if I'm saying anything racially motivated. Some people might take it that way, but I'm not attempting to do that. I'm just trying to explain to you something that they were looking for. So the concept or the idea behind this was that this white spot was just a symptom of the plague. And it was a sign that the person may be infected. As we see when it says that, as far as in verse 4, when it says the spot is white on the skin of the flesh, but it's not deeper. So, and the hair didn't turn white yet, so it's still looking at the sign, but that part of the flesh is white. So the priest has to shut him up for 7 days to watch, to make sure that this doesn't turn to the plague of Tasara'at. All right. Now I want you to look a little careful. Go to the 12th verse. I'm trying to speed through it. But if you were to read this portion, you would be astonished. And it's surprising how a lot of people completely overlook this. Go to the 12th verse of the 13th chapter. And it says, if the Tasara'at break out abroad in the skin, and the Tasara'at cover all the skin of him that has the plague, from his head even to his feet, wheresoever the priest looks. So this shows you that the plague of Tasara'at is not just a spot here or a spot there, but this white spot can cover the whole body from head to foot. So where no matter where the priest look, he sees this white skin on the flesh. It says, then the priest shall consider and behold, if the Tasara'at has covered all his flesh, he shall pronounce him clean that has the plague. It is all turned white. He is clean. So in other words, the person now is completely white. Now, one thing that should puzzle you or get you to think is, if we looking to see if someone is turning completely white, if we're looking to see if someone has turned completely white, then what color were they at first? Think about that. A lot of people don't like to deal with the color issue, but I really like to point different things out because we got a lot of stuff against us, and that's one of the things is a negative outlook of ourselves. I'm in the school system and I see children that look like us every day and really believe that they're supposed to be gangsters and thugs. That's what they believe. And they look at me like I'm, as far as like one kid told me, and I just looked at him and said, man. One kid told me the other day that I was the dirty cop. So I'm thinking, well, why I'm the dirty cop? Because I'm writing, because even though I'm appearing like I'm with the system, but I'm really like them. Why? Because I'm black. And this is just the concept. I'm sitting there thinking, y'all could run around and do all this stuff. Smart young guys. But focus on the wrong thing. And I'm like, and even though I try to tell them about focus on the right thing, it goes in one ear and out the other because everything around them, from music, the videos, what they see when they go home or whatever, is telling them this is who you are and this is how you're supposed to be. So some things been turned around. So whenever I am lucky enough to get this portion, I try to always break this down to explain, to try to reverse that computer chip that's been placed in our brain to tell us that this is who you are. I try to do whatever I can do to reverse that and say, no, this is who you are. And this is what people try to tell you you're supposed to be. But with that being said, if you're looking for someone to turn, if you're looking at someone to see if they are completely white in flesh tone, then what color were they at first? Exactly. They had to be darker. Even if you want to be like some brothers I know that say, well, it wasn't that dark. We can debate over that. But the point being made was they weren't the way that we see them on the different movies that is portrayed for us to watch. They didn't look like that. I'm going to give you another clue. If you go to, before I get ahead of myself, I want you to notice that it said once the flesh turned completely white from head to toe, they were looking now to see, the object now is to see if it's some kind of rising or some kind of opening or rawness in the flesh. Because that's actually the plague itself. The color is just a symptom. So when you see someone, you see that color, it's like you're thinking, okay, they might have it. But it's when you actually see the rawness in the flesh that you know the person actually has it. So that's why I said when they looked from head to toe, they seen him was white all over, the person was clean. But look what it says in verse 14. It says, but when raw flesh appears in him, he shall be unclean. Why? It says, and the priest shall see the raw flesh and pronounce him to be unclean, for the raw flesh is unclean. So it's not so much, and that's why when they seen the discoloration at first, he was all right. They just shut him up for a few days because they were looking to see if they was going to see this raw flesh. Because that's actually what the uncleanness is. It's not the skin color, but it's the raw flesh. So now, I want to show you something else. If you go to the 29th verse of the 13th chapter, it says, if a man or a woman have a plague upon the head or the beard, the priest shall look to see the plague, and behold, if it be in a sight deeper than the skin, and if there be in it yellow thin hair. Oh, wait a minute. Yellow thin hair? Who had yellow thin hair? It says it clear in the text. People overlook this. It says, if there be in it yellow thin hair, the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is a dry scald, even a tasara'at upon the head or the hair and the beard. So a sign of it in your hair is your hair turning thin and yellow. All right. Go to the 45th verse. And while we're going to the 45th verse of the 13th chapter, I wanted to point out that it's a word, whenever you see the word plague being used, it's a Hebrew word that's being used there. Actually, this word is spelled with the nun, the gamel, and the ayin. And it's pronounced nigah. Think about it. So this plague of your skin turning white and your hair turning thin and yellow, this plague is called nigah. Seriously. Now I know what it sounds like that we heard all the time, being called, but I'm just thinking about how crazy that is, where it's a complete opposite. Where, because we are black in skin tone or brown in skin tone, we were called nigger or nigger with the at the end. But the Hebraic word dealing with a plague, and the plague that we're looking at now is your skin turning all white and your hair turning thin and yellow, it's called nigah. Crazy, right? It's like topsy-turvy, like the whole world turned upside down. Well, let's look at what the treatment of how these guys, the treatment these guys had to succumb to. If you go to and still in the 13th chapter, go to 45th verse, it says, and the Metzorah, or the leper, in whom the plague is, in other words, this person has the plague, and there's a Metzorah, and a Metzorah just means the person has the sara'at. So that's the term that they're called a Metzorah. So it says, and the Metzorah in whom the plague is, his clothes shall be rent. In other words, he shall tear his clothes, his head bare. He make sure he don't have anything cover his hair so you can see how his hair looks. And he shall put a covering upon his upper lip, and shall cry out, Tameh, Tameh, or unclean, unclean. So imagine this. So you already have an illness that stigmatizes you, where you look different from everybody else. And now you have to make sure you don't cover your head. Gotta wear something that covers up your lip. And you gotta yell out, unclean, unclean, as you get near people. It says, all the days wherein the plague shall be in him, he shall be defiled. He is unclean. He shall dwell alone, outside the camp shall his habitation be. That's a lonely, lonely life. Now I want you to think about something, because you know how we are as human beings. Now imagine someone who has the symptoms of Tasara'at, but is not infected with the plague. How do you think they were treated? If people seen them and their hair looked a certain way, their skin looked a certain way, but they were walking, they didn't cover up their lip, and they wasn't saying unclean, unclean, because they didn't have the full plague. But how do you think people treat them? Well, with how we see how we treat each other for all kind of illnesses, especially something that we feel is contagious, people treat them like they have it. Even though they don't got it. But because you look the part, I'm going to treat you like you got it. We're scared. So now, even if you don't got it, you still forced out the camp to live by yourself. That's deep. And just thinking, I'm just filling this in, just trying to get you to just picture it. But just think, you kicked out, you live by yourself, and all you hear when people talk about you is, that's the person, that's the nigga. This is the last imprint on your mind. Not saying that it happened, but if it did happen and these people congregated together and they wanted revenge, would you blame them? It's just throwing it out there. That's where the story from the Haftarah comes in at. Now I was going to go into Miriam and how Miriam, because the sages teach that you get to Sara'at because you are speaking Lashon Hara. And Lashon Hara is evil talk or gossip. You know, we love some juicy gossip. He laughed in the back, huh? I mean, TV, people become instant stars nowadays based off of gossip. People you would have never heard of in your life is now rich on your TV, and everybody tuning in every week to see them because of gossip and drama, as we call it. So this idea or this concept is crazy, but the whole thing is when we see with the story of Miriam is talking bad about Moshe and speaking bad about his wife, her and Aharon. And Aharon was listening, which according to the laws of Lashon Hara is wrong. He was listening to the evil talk. Doesn't make it seem like he was actually participating, but he was listening to the evil talk. But Miriam was actually the one speaking. So when the Almighty punished them or came at them and said, why do y'all not fear to talk about my servant Moses? Miriam was instantly had the illness of Tasara'at placed upon her. And it said, she was leprous. And from how it looks at it like she was leprous from the top of her head to the bottom of her feet. So much so that Aharon said, please don't let her continue to be as a dead person. I want to get you with the concept behind this. We all know, we all seen spooky movies and said, what color are ghosts? Whenever we think about a spirit, its concept is white. And in different parts of Africa, when they deal with the dead, they paint their bodies with this clay where they look white. So I just want to get you just to understand this concept behind it, just to show even more that that's what, that was one of the symptoms of this illness. Now, like what I was saying earlier, if we go to the Haftorah portion, here we have 4 lepers, or 4 men with tasara'at, or 4 metzorim, which is metzorah in the plural, metzorim. We have 4 of them. And I want you to notice that all the people are locked in the city. And the Syrians want to get into the city, but they can't because of the fortifications. So they want to get into the city, but they can't. And the people who are in the city that may want to get out can't get out. So now we have these 4 metzorim, or lepers, that are out the camp because of their illness. And these guys could have been angry that they were outcasts. When they was plundering those camps, they could have just went in and plundered and gathered all the stuff that they wanted to gather and could have went on doing what they wanted to do. But instead, 1 or 2 of them reasoned with each other and said, we are not doing the right thing. And maybe thinking about the idea behind why they got the illness and blaming themselves and saying it's because of our behavior that we're this way in the first place. They said if we continue like this before, nightfall and before the next day, we really going to go through something. We got to spread this news. We got to let the king and everyone on the inside know what's going on. So they went to tell them. Now, of course, when they came close to the city, they had to say, unclean, unclean. Because we know that's what the Torah says. And the gatekeeper looked down at them, and they began to yell up to them and tell them what they just witnessed and what they experienced. And then the gatekeeper relates it back to the people within the city, and it gets back to the king. But all this was possible because these guys were outside the camp. So what I'm saying is sometimes things happen for a reason. Because if they would have never had Tasara'at, if they would have never been Metzorim or lepers, they would have never been outside the camp. They would have never came upon the Syrians, would have never witnessed or experienced any of that stuff, and the people within the city would have died of starvation. But because they were out there, that made the difference. I was talking to my daughter this morning when I woke up, trying to give her some encouragement on different things that she's dealing with, and also trying to talk to her to wake her up. Figure if I keep rambling on, and she'll just wake up. But I was explaining to her how my original high school that I was slated to go to was the School of the Arts. I was dependent on getting that school. I wanted to get in that school so bad. And everything seemed like it was working right for me to get into that school. But because of some guy that was supposed to be my friend, who, when we got in a scuffle, ran on me. Ran. The scuffle had to do with him. They had nothing to do with me. But he ran. So when we got to school, after that, of course, I'm not dealing with him because you ran. So he's trying to be friendly. I'm ignoring him. It's going on and on. I got some people whispering he ran on him and this, that, and the other. So now he decides that he wants to fight me. Didn't want to fight the guys. But now he want to fight me. And I'm going on and I'm ignoring him, and then he pushed the right button and we did it. We fought. But when the school security came, unlike him who just stopped, I was so angry that I just could not stop. And it wasn't until he said, I'm going to have to put the cuffs on you. Then I stopped there. But needless to say, or unfortunately, because of that incident, and because when the school officer tried to get me to stop, I didn't stop. The school decided to teach me a lesson. They were going to suspend me. Somebody, he started to fight with me, and I'm getting suspended. Like, this is crazy. But this is during the time period where the School of the Arts was doing their inquiring and trying to figure out who they were letting in. So word, of course, got to them of my suspension. So I got a letter saying that I was not going to be allowed into the school. And I always remember it said, we don't need students like you. I said, students like me? And I just resonated. I just kept thinking, I don't need students like me in their school. I mean, now looking back, I'm like, well, y'all had a student like Tupac in your school. But you ain't need a student like me in your school. Because when I ended up going to this school called Carver, I ran into this teacher called Mr. Chanel Alford, and he opened up a world of knowledge to me about who I am, how we was lied to all our lives, stuff that I never even knew, and it changed everything. So as I was telling you, sometimes things happen for a reason. It might not be what you want to happen, but it happens so you can be you in that situation and change not only your outlook or your surroundings, but the surroundings of everyone around you. So you might came into something, or some things may have happened to you in your life, and you feel like now you're thinking, well, if only this would have happened, and if only that would have happened. But don't think on anything, because everything happens for a reason. Everything happens for a reason. And the whole outlook on it is for you to see what reason whatever happened to you. Because these guys, if they would have never had this illness, then the prophecy that Elisha foretold would not have taken place in that manner. Think about it. But it took place because those guys was out there. And then and the other thing I was thinking about was, you got to be careful when you come against the man of Elohim. Because Elijah kind of let people say stuff here, but Elisha didn't play with you. You came at Elisha, it was going to be a bad outcome for you. Whether you was a child or grown up. The children was messing with him because he was losing his head, so bears came out of the woods and killed him. He didn't even say nothing to him. He just was teasing him. He didn't even say a word to him. Bears just came out. Like, wow. And this guy who doubted him, he said, tomorrow this time. And they should know if he said it's going to happen. He said, tomorrow this time, the fine flour is going to be sold for 1 shekel, and 2 seahs of barley for 1 shekel. And the guy like, if the Almighty opened up the windows of heaven, would that be? Like, yeah, it's going to happen. You're going to see it with your eyes, but you're not going to eat of it. So the whole concept is no matter what, and then we see even with them, even in their state, they still strive to do the right thing, and still strive to be a blessing for the people, even though they were the outcasts. So the concept with all this is no matter what state you're in, continue to do what Yahweh wants you to do. No matter what state you're in, strive to keep His Torah. Because that's going to make the difference. If you angry or upset about whatever state you're in, you just don't do anything, then the adversary already won. Because that's his point, to stop you from keeping the Torah. Remember what he said about Job? He said, if you take everything away from me, he's going to curse you to your face. Even put the words in his wife ear. Why don't you curse the Almighty and die? Man, that's your wife. This is your other half. Hey, what's going on here? But throughout it all, he kept holding on. Might have said a couple of words, thinking about himself for a minute, but he stayed faithful. And that's the whole thing. No matter what situation we're going through, we got to stay faithful to Yahweh and do what He would have for us to do. So with that being said, what's the conclusion of the matter? Fear Yahweh and keep His commandments. Amen.